What's up, guys? This is Coach Alex Van Houten with Better Daily. Tonight, we are diving into sleeping like a boss. And in this workshop, we're going to be speaking specifically about 5 things that we can do in order to improve our sleep quality. And so, we've got a few of our group members who are joining us live, and they'll ask questions as they roll in. So, here we go. First, our agenda this evening, we're going to speak a bit about why we sleep. And so that might sound obvious. It's not as obvious as it sounds. So we're going to talk a bit about why we sleep. And then we're going to talk about controlling our controllables. These are the 5 S's of great sleep. And that'll be really the meat of our evening and will likely generate the questions that our group needs to hear to improve their sleep. Then we'll talk about managing our controllables, aging, anxiety, and babies. Oh my, there are some things that affect our sleep that we cannot control, and it's worth, if we're going to be talking about sleep, it's worth making sure that those are brought up as well. And then we'll end with a Q&A. So if we generate some questions here and we don't get to everything that everybody wants to hear covered, then we'll make sure we dive into that as well. So some of the burning questions we had prior to the recording this workshop, and then also in the application from the Better Daily community. One, are naps a good thing? Are they necessary if I don't get the recommended 7 hours of sleep? And what constitutes a good nap? So I'll make sure that we cover that this evening. Excuse me. Then I had a question that said, hey, I feel fine off of about 4 hours of sleep. Do I really need more than that? And I'm hoping to answer that adequately this evening as well. And then what supplements can I take to help me with my sleep? And so this is a question I get very frequently. I wish there was a sleeping pill that actually gave good sleep and didn't just make you unconscious, because, then we would solve this whole sleep problem right up front, but there isn't one of those. And so we'll talk a bit about some of the home remedies, so to speak, from a sleeping perspective. But don't worry, this won't be all about supplements, just some things that you can have in your repertoire. And then prior to hitting record here, we did have someone ask about making sure that we cover medications, how the medications can affect your sleep. I intend to cover some of the things that medications do to disrupt your sleep. And then there are also medications that are prescribed as sleep aids. And I want to talk a bit about how some of those work so that you have a better understanding how to have a great conversation with your doctor about those things. So here we go. Oop, went backwards. Coming up here. All right. So why do we sleep? Actually, a really fascinating book was just released in the last year called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. He is a PhD who studies sleep patterns and the effects of sleep on all kinds of systems in the body. And it's not the only book on sleep. There are actually quite a few books about why we sleep and how we sleep and what dreams mean and that sort of thing. So you can really dive down this rabbit hole if you care to. But this was a pretty well cited and well put together volume. And he also did a TED talk and an hour-and-a-half lecture on YouTube. So if you care to go listen to him talk about T cell activation and the effect of sleep on testicle size and things like that, then it's all there. He's got a great accent, so it's a lot of fun to hear him talk about it. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on why we sleep here, except just to highlight a few things. But before I get to the bullet points that are in front of you, I want you to picture this, okay? In Better Daily, we speak a lot about how exercise is more than calories burned, and how the food we eat is more than calories consumed, right? And the idea being that our exercise is a stressor that can unlock the genes inside of us that allow for our potential to be manifested, biologically speaking, and that the nutrition that we consume, the building blocks and the energy that we eat, they also affect the way our genes are expressed. Now, all of that said, sleep is the process of recovery and repair that allows those things to be true. So, when I speak about these different things in relationship to obesity or learning, for instance, just know that the sleep cycle, the sleep process, the process of your body shutting down, going unconscious, and it's not like you're dormant. It's not like when you press sleep on your computer key and nothing happens in the background. It's actually almost a superpower where I have an engineering buddy of mine who they make cardboard boxes, of all things. He went to school for a long time so that they really make cardboard boxes really well. And his job is to make sure all the machines that are involved in this cardboard box making process, it's actually very fascinating. He walked me through it over coffee once. But make sure all the machines are working well. And sometimes the factory has to shut down completely. There are some repairs that are required that you can do while the machine's kind of going, or you can shut it off for a little bit and you can repair the machine and then turn it back on. But 3 times a year they have to shut down the entire factory and go through and make all the repairs that cannot be done while things are in process. And that's what sleep is to you. There are repairs that have to be done in your brain and in your body that cannot be done while you're conscious, while you're able to interact with the world and make decisions and move around and jump around and type on your keyboard and all those things. There are repairs that have to be made from a biological perspective that can't be done while you're conscious. And so that's really the core of why we sleep. It's the repair process for the body, and in a bunch of different ways, hormonally, from a neurological perspective, from an immunological perspective. There's so many systems in the body that are dependent on the repair process of our sleep. So why do we sleep? Well, there's several studies that are coming out about how our sleep is associated with a bunch of different mechanisms. So first, there's a relationship with obesity. So one of the things that you'll find if you dive into the sleep research is that sleeping better, like getting higher quality, higher quantity sleep, because the average American sleeps about 5.75 hours of sleep per night. If that doesn't blow your mind, it should. 5.75 hours of sleep per night. And the recommended amount, the amount that seems to be associated with positive health, is somewhere between 7 and 8. There's some people that vary, and that's fine. But that's a big deal. And we see this quite frequently with regard to daylight savings time. You'll see a bullet at the bottom there on the slide. The daylight savings experiment every single year in the U.S., except for in Arizona where they don't observe this daylight savings time thing. Every single year in the U.S., we spring forward and we fall back. Well, when we spring forward, we actually lose an hour, and heart attacks go up 21% on that one day compared to the rest of the days in that month. And that's mind-boggling. And similarly, when we fall back, heart attacks actually go down 21%. When you gain an hour of sleep. And so we actually do this experiment every single year, and we find that there are so many systems tied into it that even the death rate is affected by taking and giving hours of sleep. There are several jokes I can make about printing money here, but I'm just going to leave my political humor to the side. So there is a relationship with obesity, and what we're finding is that when folks don't sleep enough or their sleep quality is poor, there are effects that happen on the hormonal system and effects that happen on the microbiome that seem to create a fat accumulating state for people and can affect their body composition. And one researcher actually suggested that if we could just fix the sleep problems in America, then most of the obesity epidemic would go away, which is a very fascinating claim. The second reason we sleep is to prepare for learning. So if you have not gotten adequate sleep, it's very, very difficult for your mind to be primed in order to learn something new. And similarly, to solidify learning. This is true in the academic space. So if you want to learn something, getting good sleep afterward will actually, hit the inscribe button on the brain, right? You read something particularly interesting in a book, or you hear Alex talk about sleep in a Better Daily workshop. If you don't get good rest this evening, then your mind is going to have a hard time holding on to that new information, because our memory system is affected significantly by sleep. That repair process that tells the neurons, hey, these connections that you made are good. Let's solidify them. Let's keep them around. That process can't happen if we're not sleeping well. So poor sleep will affect both your preparation for learning and your ability to hold on to what you learned as well. Then we've got hormonal resilience. So the DHEA candle that your body is taking resources from in order to build your hormones. DHEA is I think of it as a candle. When we say burning the candle at both ends, I automatically think of a very large chemical that's being depleted by the body in order to make things like testosterone and cortisol and thyroid hormone. Not everybody thinks like that, but I do. So that candle, that DHEA candle, is actually increased by sleep. If you lose several nights of sleep over a period of time, when you normally sleep 7 hours, you sleep 4 hours for a few nights, or you're sleeping on maybe you're traveling around the US and visiting family and all that stuff, and you're sleeping in somebody else's bed and sleeping poorly, whatever, that whole DHEA candle starts to diminish, and it can also mess with your body's ability to produce the other hormones in concert with each other. So things like cortisol, things like estrogen, things like testosterone. I think this is one of the primary reasons that dads see a huge dip in testosterone over the first 6 months of their first child's life, because of the sleep deprivation process. There might be a few other mechanisms, but that's one postulated reason. Then there's tissue repair and recovery. So this actually has to do with your exercise portion. We've got a couple people in here this evening who say they're sore from their workout, which is a great way to be. And if you get some good sleep tonight, specifically during your deep sleep cycle, your body will actually be repairing and restoring the tissues of the body. So those muscles that you worked really hard in the gym setting, and you kind of broke them down a little bit and increased the inflammatory response and told the body, hey, this muscle that you have, it's not adequate enough. And similarly, the neurons that were challenged by the workout, the nervous system tissue that was challenged by the workout, those will be going through a process of repair and recovery this evening. Now, if you don't sleep well, you get shorter sleep, shorter duration, shorter or smaller quality sleep, then what can happen to you is your gains, the effectiveness of the workout to adapt your tissue, can be diminished. And so, as I said, exercise ideally is more than calories burned, but it will only be calories burned if you don't recover well. And so tissue repair and recovery is part of that why we sleep process. And then immune function. This is something that Dr. Walker talks about quite extensively in the Why We Sleep. He's talking about T cell responsiveness, that is the immune system function responsiveness. One night of half the sleep that participants usually get reduce their T cell function by 75%. And so in layman's terms, that means that your ability to fight infections or to stave off the growth of cancerous cells is reduced by 75% after one night of poor sleep. And I mean, the entire book's filled with stuff like that. So like, if I'm not like making you think, gee, I hope I'm sleeping enough, or maybe I should get on this thing, then the book will scare you into sleeping well. And maybe you'll have nightmares and you won't sleep well. And that would be a very effective way of sleeping. Now, but it's full of all of the reasons why we sleep. So I took just a few minutes here to at a 10,000-foot view look at this. But case in point, if you don't take anything else away from me tonight, your sleep is extremely important. And this idea of I'll sleep when I'm dead, or I can run off very little sleep, it's fine, it's no big deal. It is a big deal, and it's a big deal in the process of being able to recover and repair you over time so that you can adapt. The whole idea of becoming better is the idea that you can adapt and become better tomorrow. And part of becoming better tomorrow is letting your body shut down and repair itself. So we'll talk about how much sleep is adequate and all that stuff in just a bit. But before I do, does anybody have any questions about why we sleep, the relationship to obesity? We'll talk about the microbiome in a little bit, hormonal resilience, tissue repair. Did I say anything that has you like, oh, whoa? Or have you heard some things about sleep cycles that you're curious about before we move on? If you're good, give me a thumbs up. If you're not, interject your question.
I actually had a doctor tell me that there was a huge effect on my cortisol, high cortisol levels with not getting sleep. So that's what kicked my butt into being more intentional about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone. And so its job is actually to wake you up in the morning, among other things. And so your circadian rhythm, we'll see that in a little bit, allows cortisol to come up kind of as the sun would be coming up, and that's what wakes you up, gets you ungroggy, and elevates your heart rate, and makes you think a little more clearly, and snaps all your systems out of the whole sleep cycle thing. And poor sleep over a period of time will actually dampen that process. It'll actually limit the body's ability to create cortisol, and so you feel groggy and fatigued, and you have a difficult time mounting a significant stress response to something that's stressful. So you're unready, you're unprepared. Yeah, that's very important. And cortisol is linked to things like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. If cortisol is having a really rough time of it, then so are the sex hormones that, grow muscle and make us less moody and make our skin pretty and bones dense. Good interjection. So I'm particularly passionate about this subject because I have 2 young children, and so not only are we hardcore about their sleep in our house, but also we're hardcore about our sleep. Being sleep deprived is not my favorite. I hate feeling stupid. It's not my favorite thing. So being sleep deprived does that, and I've spoken at length on our partner podcast about how to work out while sleep deprived, and kind of done this in a more bullet pointed or rapid fashion. So if you need those sorts of resources, or you want to dive into those things, shoot me a message after this in the app, and I'll make sure that you get those too. So first, I promised you 5 things we can do about our sleep. This is the first of 5 S's. The first S is same. The first thing we can do about our sleep is we can get to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every morning. And you might have already heard this before. And if you have, you're like, oh, okay, I know that. No. Don't just know that. This is the thing. This is the kit and caboodle. This is the one thing. If everybody would just set a dang bedtime and wake up at the same time every morning, a lot of people would be much better off. And the reason for that is we are diurnal mammals. Diurnal, diurnal, diurnal mammals, which means that our biological system is set up to be conscious when the sun is up and to be unconscious when the sun is down, to seek shelter, build a fire, sleep in the back of the cave where no Wayne Doodles or Bigfoots will come eat you, and that's how our biological system operates. When people go to bed at different times, because nowadays we can turn on the lights whenever we want to, we can turn on Netflix, we can stay up with friends, we can sleep in the next morning on the weekend, that sort of thing. That really messes with this system. And not just like kind of messes with it, it really messes with it. It can mess with the microbiome. It can mess with the pineal gland at the base of the brain. It can mess with the hormonal function of cortisol and melatonin and growth hormone. So if you're at ground zero, what can I do to support my sleep? You need to get serious about setting a bedtime and setting a wake time. I don't even care what it is. I have a picture here of the ideal circadian rhythm, which is basically 6 a.m. is the wake time, and then around 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., depending on how much sleep you need, that is the ideal sleep time. Now, for some people that's shifted in one direction. So maybe you get up at 4 and you go to bed at 8, fine. Or maybe you stay up till midnight and you wake up at 8, fine. What matters the most, because people differ on how much sleep they need and when their body's telling them to go to bed and that sort of thing. And we'll talk about, coolness and light exposure in a bit. But if you don't do anything else, just please keep that the same. Keep that the same. And I put a bullet point here. Why do people hate Mondays? Most people hate Mondays. Not everybody. I know there's some, I might be preaching to the choir here. A lot of us will wake up in the morning and go, all right, this is a week. Monday can be rough. It's Wednesdays for me are the big, are the roughest day. Mondays are great. But the trope, the meme, Garfield used to like, oh, I hate Mondays. That's because people sleep in on the weekends trying to catch up on sleep they didn't get during the week. Well, if you signal to your body, your circadian rhythm, that we're not waking up at 6, we're going to wake up at 9. We're going to stay in bed till 9. I can't remember the last time I stayed in bed till 9, but hang with me. Some people sleep till 9. Then what happens is, you have Saturday, you sleep till 9. You have Sunday, you sleep till 9. And then Monday rolls around and you wake up at 6 again, and your body's like, wait a second, like, no, we wake up at 9. but you're waking up, so you got no cortisol, your blood pressure isn't where it needs to be, you're not really all that conscious, and people walk in like, oh, it's Monday. Like, yeah, the reason you feel that way is because you slept in on the weekend. So stop that. Stop sleeping on the weekend. Dang it. How am I ever going to catch up on sleep, Alex? Don't worry, we'll get there. But this is extremely important. Your circadian rhythm, the part of you that's inside, it's made up of several different systems. The pineal gland that excretes melatonin, your adrenal glands that excrete cortisol, your microbiome, even the bacteria in your gut are affected by whether or not it's light outside versus dark. And all of that system and process is a slow moving train. Your body adapts to it very slowly. And so what you do from a day-to-day basis will affect that slow moving train. If it's consistent and stable, then your circadian rhythm is going to help you sleep and wake up without a lot of work on your part. If it's not consistent and it's all over the place, and you're not going to bed at a decent time regularly, and you're not waking up at a normal time regularly, it will mess up the system. In fact, in several studies on depression, they found that implementing a sleep and wake time was enough to cure depression altogether. Like, that one of the number one things that will tell somebody whether or not they're going to experience a depressive episode is whether or not they're awake in the middle of the night and asleep during the day. When you flip that circadian rhythm, it really messes with you. So if you don't take anything else away from me today outside of sleep is a process of recovery, the first S is same. Let's keep the sleep time and the wake time the same as often as possible. And during the times that it's not possible, it would be best to still wake up at the same time and take a nap later that day rather than sleep in. So one of the questions earlier was about naps. One of the utilities of naps is if you're unable to get to bed at your normal time and you have a sleep deficit the next day that you'd like to catch up on, rather than staying asleep and sleeping in, it would be best for your circadian rhythm if you just woke up at your normal time and then made time for a nap later. Even a short nap could be rejuvenating enough so that you can enter your normal sleep cycle at your normal time later that day. So the next one is shiver. Do you have any questions about same here? Same time, morning, evening? We've got some early risers live with us. So you're like, you might be like me. My friends picked on me in college because I was in bed at 11 every night. They're like, no. The fun's just getting started. And I'm like, I'm going to be up at 6. Like, see ya. I'm out. Peace. Okay, great. So the second S is shiver. So one of the things that we can actually control in our controllable environment around sleep is how cold it is. What you see in front of you is a graph of the temperature, the core temperature of your biological process. And this is actually natural. This happens naturally in your body. But if the environment around you is not cool enough for you to dump your heat, then you're going to have a hard time falling asleep and staying asleep. What you'll see is the majority of the dip actually happens naturally between 12 a.m. and 4 a.m. So when I have people telling me that they wake up pretty frequently in the second half of their sleep, usually the deep cycles of sleep are the first couple hours of sleep. And then the REM cycles of sleep are the next couple hours of sleep. Deep sleep is for the body. Deep sleep is for the tissues of the body, not exclusively, but it seems to be that our body, the muscles and tendons and ligaments, that recovers mostly during deep sleep. And then REM sleep is about the recovery of our neurological system and brain. So when folks tend to wake up and have difficulty staying asleep after a few hours of sleep, then the first thing that I usually recommend is to lower their thermostat. So bump that sucker down a couple degrees and help your body stay cool. Because if it gets too warm, it will signal to the body that the sun is coming up and that it's time to wake up. But that's not the case. The dude telling people in Texas that they should sleep at 78 degrees is, well, I understand the reasoning, but dang, Like it's gonna be hard to sleep with that. If that's you and you don't have control of the temperature, sometimes putting a fan on you can actually help. Can help to keep the skin temperature low. That way you can actually rest well. But this is a really big deal. It's a simple fix for most people in the modern day. You just drop the temperature a couple degrees. We used to sleep in caves before we built houses. You know, that was the majority of our shelters and stuff that we did were kind of, and I don't know if you've been in a cave lately, but it's cold in there, man. It stays around 65 to 70 degrees all year round, no matter how hot it is outside, and sometimes even cooler. And so that normal low temperature allowing us to dump heat is a huge part of sleeping well. So there can be a couple, conflicts between if you have a spouse who's a little cold sensitive, then this could be a challenge. In our house, one of us sleeps with a blanket, the other one doesn't, and that usually fixes it. And then they've also got nowadays they have a product called a chili pad. It was pretty overpriced last time I checked it out for what it actually is. It's like a pad you put on your bed that goes under you when you sleep, and it's like a personal cooling unit that actually keeps you cool, so that the temperature of the whole house doesn't have to reflect your need to keep things cool. This is also one of the reasons that ladies going through menopause have trouble with sleep, because progesterone has an interaction in the body that can actually increase the core temperature of the body significantly really fast. That's called a hot flash, and hot flashes in the middle of the night will wake you up out of your sleep as well. So my mother-in-law said that she used to like the house nice and warm when she slept until she went through menopause, and now my father-in-law complains that she requires the house to be at 65 degrees to get good sleep, and so he's over there freezing, and she's like, "Oh, this is great." So I understand there's negotiations that are required to get the sleep thing down, but worth having, because biologically this is a very important way that you can improve your depth of sleep and quantity. So I've talked about shiver here. What questions from our live group are there out about shivering? I call it shiver. You don't have to shiver to sleep well. It's just, it's an S
My
word.
daughter thanks you.
What's that?
My daughter thanks you because I'm one of these people that keeps the house at 78 and I'm very comfortable, and she's complaining that she can't sleep. So I into dropping it a bit.
maybe get a fan for her room or
I
something.
did give her a fan, and I shut the rest of the vents around the house so that
there you go.
Go into her room.
There you go. That's good. Tell her I'm on her side. I remember as a kid, my mom didn't really believe in air conditioning. Well, she did. It was just a money saving thing. Like,
yeah.
Don't run the air conditioning at night much. So I remember as a child, I was probably 8 years old, and I was like laying on the drywall, like against my wall, like just trying to cool the body off. Mom, I'm so hot. So she got me a fan. That helps.
I did give her a fan, and I did pump the air up in her room.
Boom. Nice job, Mom. The third S is stress. You don't want more stress to sleep. Stress throughout the day will affect your sleep cycle. Picture this again. You're a caveman trying to fall asleep in your cave. If your body is telling you there's a mountain lion outside, it is very, very bad to fall asleep. You don't want to fall asleep if you might get eaten in your sleep, right? So stress is actually a huge disruptor of sleep cycles, and there's a bunch of different stressors worth talking about. So stress management is paramount. What you see here in the diagram in front of you is that in the first half of sleep, cortisol has to be low. That's your major stress hormone. Cortisol has to be low to trigger the sleep process altogether. Cortisol eats melatonin. If you haven't heard of melatonin, melatonin is one of the hormones that's excreted by your brain, by your pineal gland, and actually somewhat by our microbiome to tell the rest of our body that it's time to sleep. It's time to start shutting down the systems. Well, cortisol is like Pac-Man. and melatonin's like a ghost. If cortisol is high in the system, it's just going to eat up all of our melatonin. And so I hear pretty frequently from people, hey, I've had sleep issues, I've tried taking melatonin, it doesn't help. Well, if your cortisol is really high when you're trying to go to sleep, you can take all the melatonin you want, it doesn't matter. Cortisol is not going to allow melatonin to do its job. And so stress management throughout the day, specifically before sleep, like in the couple hours prior to sleep, is paramount. This is paramount. This is almost as big of a deal as setting a bedtime and a wake time. It's more of a big deal if stress is something that's continually keeping you up. We've probably heard the saying or the idiom, things that keep me up at night, right? Things that stress me out. It's not a figure of speech for no reason. It's true. There are things that keep us up at night. The stressful response of our internal system can affect the sleep cycle. So cortisol has to be low for growth hormone to be high, and growth hormone is the reparative hormone that's doing all of the work or signaling the cells of the body to do all the work while we're sleeping. And then through the second half of sleep, cortisol starts to rise, and that's partially why you can be conscious during dreams and whatnot. And then growth hormone starts to go back down in response to the cortisol rising. So it's very paramount. One type of stress we're talking about is microbial stress. So people think of stress as like, oh, this thing is stressful, or I am conscious and aware that this thing is stressful. But there's a whole subsystem of the body, our microbiome, that responds to the stressful state of our body outside of our cognition or conscious control. So I'll use me as an example. I just took a trip to Tennessee, which is about a 7-hour drive, and I slept in one of the rooms in my mom's house. We spent some time with family there. My wife and I celebrated our 6-year anniversary, and all those are wonderful things. However, it's very stressful on your system to tell your body to go sleep in a environment that you don't normally sleep in, and to change things about your routine, like where your kids are sleeping and what time breakfast is and how often people walk up and down the hallway in the middle of the night, right? So there's a number of factors that can affect sleep. I didn't feel personally stressed, but there are studies that are showing that our microbiome responds to those stressful situations such that it changes different types of bacteria that are present in our microbiome and not present in our microbiome. So when I say microbiome, think of an army on a battlefield. You've got your horsemen guys, and you got your archers, and you got your swordsmen, and if you're real archaic, you have your mages that cast fireballs and stuff. I'm just kidding. I'm kind of a nerd. But anyway, you have all your different types of battlefield warriors. In your gut, there is present all these different types of bacteria. And they're all there. And in certain situations, it would be good if there were a lot more swordsmen than archers. And in certain situations, it would be really good if there were more archers than swordsmen. I know this isn't a perfect analogy, but hang with me. Stress can change what type of bugs are in your gut. And there are some bugs in your gut that are really good at getting you to bed on time. And there are some bugs in your gut that are really, really bad at getting you to bed on time. There are also some bugs in your gut that can push sugar cravings. There are some bugs in your gut that can extract more calories from your food than others. And so what happens is, if we are in a constant stressful state and our microbiome is unmanaged, we're not sleeping well, we're eating poorly, we're in different environments all the time, we're not taking a probiotic to fix those things. When things are erratic like that, it actually fosters a microbiome that is not helpful to our sleep cycle. And so I see this happen in clients where they do a lot of travel for work, for instance, or maybe they do a lot of traveling with their family. And I'm not saying travel's bad. It's actually really good if you can support your body in the travel, from a supplemental perspective, from a nutrition perspective, from a sleep cycle perspective. And I know that's a lot of extra work, but what happens is they go on these trips and stuff, and then they come back home and they sleep poorly for weeks. And it's an internal stressor. Their microbiome has to shift back in the unstressed direction, so to speak, for their sleep to get back on track. And we're just starting to understand this. It's kind of creepy to think that there are bacteria in your gut that can keep you laying in bed awake at night because their metabolites don't make it very easy for you to fall asleep. Like, I don't know about you, but that freaks me out enough for me to lay in bed at night and think about the bacteria that are probably keeping me up after my trip. Womp womp. Because I'm a little weird, but that is a thing. We are learning that is a thing, that microbial stress is a thing, and it's important to manage our microbiome and to take good care of it. And so we'll talk about that more with regard to supplements, but that's the thing. Then there's mental stress. I can't tell you how many people have asked me to help them with their sleep when at the end of the day it was something they needed to fight with their spouse about. I'm sorry, there's no supplement for that. Like, if you guys are having a hard time managing your teenagers and there's something that really needs to be talked about with regard to smartphones, you can take every magnesium pill in the world and you're not going to fall asleep. You're just going to be constantly thinking about what you need to say. And so you need to go say that thing, probably not at 2 a.m., mind you, maybe, schedule a date for that sort of thing. I'm not intending to sound patronizing here. Mental stress, regardless of the source, is a thing that can affect your sleep. And not enough people say it out loud. Unfortunately for doctors, a lot of times people will come into the the clinical setting and say, "Hey doc, I'm having trouble sleeping," and they'll listen for a little bit and then they'll be like, "Okay, well, here's a sleep aid." And I'm sorry, the way those sleep aids work, they're not going to fix the problem if the problem is something that needs to be changed and there's a good reason for you to be anxious and stressed at night. And so that's a big deal that can certainly affect your sleep. Light stress is a thing. So right now I have a ring light right here that's shining on me so I don't look dark in this video, right? That light is coming into my eyes and signaling to my body that it is daylight outside. Right now in the summer at 7:45 in Arkansas, that's actually normal. But in the winter, when the sun would go down around 5, maybe 4:30, this could certainly affect my sleep. Being stressed by light. And I don't mean I feel stressed because light's in my face. I'd barely notice it. But my body is signaling to the rest of my system. My eyes are signaling to the rest of my system that it's bright outside and I should be awake, right? So light stress is a thing. Nowadays, we can turn on lots of lights. We've got our smartphones, we've got our TV screens. And so if we're exposing ourselves to a large amount of light prior to going to sleep, then we're shooting our circadian rhythm in the foot there. So one of the things you can do is just start being like a middle-aged man who's trying to save electricity in the house. Just start flipping lights off at like 5 or 6 p.m. Just start flipping them off. And then about an hour or two before bed, shut all but maybe a lamp off if you have some reading to do. And if you're going to watch TV, set it on one of the darker settings. Or nowadays they have these really cool, stylish blue light glasses. I don't particularly enjoy wearing those. I don't like wearing normal glasses on a regular basis. They're frustrating to me, and I have a prescription. But the blue light lenses will block some of that light stress from telling your body to stay awake. So you could do that if you're unwilling to turn down the brightness on your devices or put them down completely. And then last but not least, you'd be like, exercise is actually really helpful for sleep. But wait, isn't that stressful? Yes, exercise is a stress, but it's a positive stressor because usually after exercise, you have a recovery process, and that can actually help with stress management. Most people who exercise report that it helps them with the mental stress and the anxiety maybe that would normally keep them up at night. The only caveat here is that nighttime workouts are really rough on sleep for most people. I've met a few people who can do a nighttime workout and then conk out just fine. But in studies, they show that working out at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. even will certainly affect sleep. So in a negative direction. So if you can get your workout in before the nighttime hours, even mid-afternoon would be much better than nighttime hours, then that would be great. Yeah, it would actually help you with your sleep. So that's stress. Have I brought anything up that you guys want to ask questions about before we move on to sugar and carbohydrates? Good. Got thumbs up across the board. Okay. Awesome. So next is a little less obvious, sugar and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates metabolism can actually create internal stressors that will affect sleep cycles. And this isn't true across the board. In fact, there are studies to suggest that carb loading at night for athletes can actually be a beneficial way to improve recovery and performance the next day. So, excuse me, this isn't a universal rule, but if you are having a hard time regulating sugar and carbohydrates, and the way you know that would be your energy is not consistent throughout the day, perhaps you're wrestling with body composition issues, meaning that you have an easy time accumulating fat, which would signal a maladaptive insulin response, or you are craving carbohydrates on a regular basis. These things would all indicate that your body has a difficult time regulating carbohydrates, and therefore a difficult time regulating the insulin and cortisol relationship. So there's actually a lot to this. When insulin's high, then it drops your blood sugar. And what happens then is your body has no choice but then to release cortisol to bring your blood sugar back to stable. And so when you consume a large amount of carbohydrates before bed at night, somewhere between, let's say you go to bed at 10 and at 8 p.m. every night, you like to have your Ben and Jerry's ice cream, even if it's a little bit of it, then what happens is your blood sugar rises and then dips precipitously after you fall asleep. And then cortisol has to be released around that 1 a.m., 2 a.m. mark, and that'll wake you up, because cortisol, remember, goes up when the sun comes up. And so it's telling the body, hey, wake up. But it wasn't the wake up call that you intended. It was the wake up call brought on by excessive carbohydrate consumption prior to bed. So if you're somebody who has a hard time regulating carbohydrates, maybe because you're deconditioned, maybe because you have a history of prediabetes or diabetes, perhaps your training cycle right now is more fat adapted than carbohydrate adapted, then limiting the amount of carbohydrates you eat in the evening and nighttime will improve your sleep progress. And that's like I said, it's not universal. It's not like, if you eat carbs before bed, that's bad. It's that some bodies are not well equipped to handle a high glycemic load in the bloodstream before bed, and it will affect your sleep. And if you're that person, you probably already know you're that person. That's well, watch out for that. Get your carbohydrates earlier in the day. Have a bowl of oatmeal in the morning if you need your carbs, rather than getting them in at night. And then the last S is supplements, and this is usually where I have the most questions, so hang with me here. I have a list, and all of these here are for different reasons, and you'll actually find the majority of these in our resources at Better Daily, linked to the education around the subject. But quick and dirty, first, magnesium is the even more so than melatonin, is the best studied supplement around improving sleep naturally. Remember, magnesium is the ion that allows tissues to relax. So it's a part of the process of relaxation. Your parasympathetic nervous system is the part of you that relaxes you. And without magnesium, it can't function appropriately. So shoring up a magnesium deficiency is a significant way to improve sleep. And then I have L-theanine on here. L-theanine is an antioxidant that you can find in green tea, but it can't drink green tea at night before bed because it has 100 milligrams of caffeine, and that's kind of counterproductive for the whole sleep thing. So L-theanine is one of the ways that you can bring your mind into focus without caffeine. And so for people who like lay down in bed at night and their mind's kind of racing, L-theanine can quiet that noise a bit. And then I have aloe and curcumin on this list because both of those have been shown to reduce inflammatory markers at the level of the gut. So remember I said taking care of the microbiome during times of stress. These two things can be a powerful part of improving the recovery process of the gut and lowering the inflammatory markers that signal those bacteria. Currently, there are no double-blind placebo-controlled trials about aloe helping sleep. There is sleep metrics associated with those who have used aloe to help with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. But researchers generally say that that's because aloe is reducing the amount of pain they're in, and so they're sleeping better. But I have anecdotal evidence with clients that I've worked with to not just anecdotal, but also, with activity monitors, sleep data, to suggest that drinking aloe would be a good experimental thing to do to improve your gut dysbiosis. And then on top of that is a probiotic. So remember, again, if you're in stressful situations where you're traveling, you're sleeping in other beds than your own, sort of thing, you're eating kind of funky compared to what you're used to eating, then those things can be mitigated, or at least the impact on your gut microbiome can be mitigated with a good probiotic. I recommend Saccharomyces boulardii. That's S and then Boulardii, Boulardii. That's a very specific type of yeast that actually helps with gut dysbiosis in humans. So probiotic can be a powerful part of that. Then vitamin D and sunlight. So if you're not getting enough sun, you can consume vitamin D. If you can actually get some sun, this can be a helpful part. And I know sunlight's not really a supplement, but vitamin D is synthesized by the skin being exposed to sunlight. And so if you can let your skin be exposed to sunlight, get your vitamin D up, that will help your sleep as well. And then for those who appreciate essential oils, there are a few that are recommended anecdotally. These three have been studied around sleep. So lavender, valerian, and sandalwood are all essential oil scents. You can rub them on your wrist. You can put them behind your ear, on your skin. You can also diffuse them or squirt them on your pillow. There are a bunch of different ways that people who appreciate essential oils are using these things. In our house, we've used lavender before on pillows or on the neck. And those scents can actually activate the parasympathetic nervous system, it seems, and improve both sleep quantity and quality. So let's say you get a really cruddy night of sleep. What can you do about that? Some people drink a lot of caffeine, and that's one thing you can do. But creatine supplementation has actually been shown to improve the resilience to sleep deprivation. And I found this when I was looking at how I'm going to handle my second child well. So Gabriel's birth, my oldest, hit me in the face like a ton of bricks, man. I was sleep deprived and not dealing with it very well. With Bennett, I was still sleep deprived, but there were several things in place that was helping me handle it much better than the first time around. And creatine was one of those things. And the studies actually show less cognitive decline when you're supplementing 3 to 5 grams of creatine daily during periods of sleep deprivation. And not only less cognitive decline, but a resilience to the depression that usually follows a period of sustained sleep deprivation. So creatine, huge recommendation, especially to you who have sleep disturbances because of kids. Sorry, real life dad talk. Then time release melatonin is still a recommendation. Again, as I said earlier, if stress is not being adequately managed, then melatonin is not going to help a lot. So remember that cortisol is kind of like a Pac-Man eating the ghosts of melatonin. And then a note on caffeine and alcohol. These aren't really supplements, they're actually drugs, right? And caffeine increases cortisol. So I recommend my clients not consume caffeine after 12 p.m. If you're trying to work on your sleep, then consuming stimulants after 12 p.m. can be a shot in the foot for you. And there are some people whose stimulants can even stay in their system for up to 20 hours. So those folks should learn to have less coffee or more decaf in their life, if that's you. And then alcohol has a different effect. It will put you to sleep, like it's a depressant. It will put you to sleep, but your sleep quality will decrease significantly. So those who consume alcohol prior to bed, and it's not like I had a glass of wine. It's like I had 3 or 4 glasses of wine, or I had enough alcohol to raise my blood alcohol content to 0.08 or 0.12, somewhere in there. That can actually affect your metabolism of glucose at the level of the liver. So it's kind of like the same problem as the carbohydrates before bed issue, the sugar regulation issue. So those who consume alcohol and report falling to sleep easier also report feeling more tired in the morning, and that's partially because it affects the depth of the sleep or the quality of the sleep, both in the deep sleep cycles and the REM sleep cycles. So be careful with alcohol and caffeine. If you're going to consume alcohol at night, consume it in very, very small amounts. And then similarly with caffeine, not after 12 p.m. And if you are somebody who consumes a lot of caffeine and you're finding yourself with sleep issues, you might actually work on reducing the amount of caffeine that you consume in the morning and seeing if that makes a difference. And then I put a note here about pre-workout and B vitamins. Pre-workouts usually have an immense amount of caffeine in them. So if you're working out at like 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. and you're using a pre-workout before your workout, that's likely affecting your sleep. See if you can wean yourself off of that or switch to a pre-workout supplement that has no caffeine in it. They do make them and they are effective. Arginine and citrulline malate and creatine, all of those things can be beneficial to your workout. And then some folks are really sensitive to B vitamins. B vitamins can affect their sleep at night. I have a client in particular, anytime the multivitamin company we usually work with changes their B vitamin content, it messes up her sleep. And what really stinks is they don't usually tell her when they do that. So there's that. You're like, hey, we changed your B vitamin content in your multi. Like, oh, gee, thanks. I'm real sensitive to that. They don't do that. So that's the list of supplements. There's more worth saying about it, but I want to make sure that this is valuable to you. So does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns about the supplement portion of sleep this evening?
Alex, so you just try each and every one of those and see which one works best for you, or find combinations, or how do you determine that?
That's a really good question. If you are testing any of this on yourself, then yes, it's a trial and error process. I wish there was a better way to do it, but everybody's body is a little bit different. I've presented to you here things that have been studied to affect the sleep cycle. And so, for instance, if you're not consuming magnesium in the evening, or you haven't taken a magnesium supplement to see if there's maybe an issue with nutrient deficiency, I would start there. And then as far as where else you might go if magnesium doesn't make a difference for you, I would then go to the gut stuff, the aloe, the probiotic, and the curcumin. I have a note here. Somebody said that vitamin D actually disrupts sleep if you take it at night, and that's a good note. I'm glad you said that. Vitamin D, we want to raise your vitamin D level by getting sunlight. If you're not getting enough sunlight, I want you to get some vitamin D in your system. But yes, there are some studies that suggest taking vitamin D before bed is a bad idea. So yeah, take that in the morning. Thank you for pointing that out. Good call. So Katie, to your question, the only thing that you can do to find these things out for yourself is to give them a try and to see whether or not it actually makes a difference in your sleep duration or quality, how rested you feel. One of the ways that I've suggested people do that in the past is by keeping a sleep journal. For most of my clients, I've spoken that of like, how are you sleeping, or what's the difference? Are you waking up at the time you normally do? That sort of thing. But if you've also got an activity monitor, you can notice your sleep score differences and your rate of sleep in each of those fronts. And none of the things that I've recommended here should take longer than a couple of days to show a difference for you. So it's not like, oh, I have to take magnesium for a month and maybe it'll change my sleep. Like, no, these should make a difference relatively quickly.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much.
Does that answer it well for you, or does that bring another?
Yeah, it does answer it well. It's just trial and error, basically. But that journaling or looking at my watch is a good idea.
Mm. There's some things going on in the chat. Somebody said, hey, kava is a good nighttime tea. It can be pretty sedating and hard on your liver if you take too much. Okay, noted. And then hibiscus tea is good anytime. Love it. And then I've used zinc, or ZMA, zinc magnesium aspartate, and have some varieties of theanine in them too. Yeah, they do exist. Now zinc in my research didn't actually affect sleep as much as it did things like testosterone and cortisol. But paired with the magnesium, it is a powerful combination. Cool. Good. Thank you guys for sharing your your remedies and stuff. I think I'll keep that out in the app. We'll start a thread. Apparently zinc makes some of us throw up. So don't do that. Now, I said I wanted to make sure that I mentioned things we can't control, uncontrollables. And this is important because I've spent the better part of the last hour talking about the things we can control, the supplements, the shiver, the sameness, the sugar, and the stress, the things that we can control, how we respond, or different things we can experiment with to improve our sleep quality and quantity. Not listed on here, and it's an oversight on my part that it's not listed. One of your uncontrollables is your genome. Your actual DNA is yours, and it can affect whether or not you're a night person or a morning person, quote unquote, or how long you need to sleep. There are some people that I've worked with that are sleeping about 5 or 6 hours a night, and they're getting sufficient deep sleep, and they're getting decent REM sleep, and they're not reporting any malfunctions. Their body composition is great. They operate at a high level. They're not tired all the time, and these folks, from a biological perspective, seem to require less sleep, and that's awesome. And then I have worked with people, I'm married to one of them, that if they don't get 9 or more hours of sleep on a regular basis, then they are not themselves. Some strange monstrous version of them appears, and I'm not talking about my wife or anything. It's a strange monstrous version of them appears, and you're like, you need to take a nap, you need to go get sleep. And so, that said, from a biological perspective, this is an uncontrollable thing. There are people who need way more sleep. So when you hear that you need 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep a night, that is an average. That's a general average of the two ends of the spectrum. On average, people need about 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep per night. And females seem to need, on average, about 20 minutes more of sleep per night than men. And there are a number of speculated reasons for that, but those are the averages. If you are a person listening to me right now who's getting 6 hours of sleep, or maybe 5.5 hours of sleep regularly, and you're like, oh no, like maybe I'm headed toward Alzheimer's, or maybe I'm recovering poorly, or maybe my hormone system's going to be all jacked up. I want you to hear that as long as your body's recovering well, you're not getting injured all the time, you are feeling pretty energetic and whatnot, it's very likely that is adequate sleep for you. Sleep deprivation is a pretty intense feeling. So anyway, all that to say, that's one of the uncontrollables is biological differences. Another uncontrollable is menopause. There are some ladies in our group who are going through or have gone through menopause. And if that's something that you're wrestling with, look, your ovaries are just flipping out, man. They're just kind of sputtering and doing their thing. And that will certainly affect your sleep. One of the best things you can do, if that's you, is get more active. Like just, and this is actually something that's been correlated with females. It was something that I just stumbled on in the past couple months, that activity in females is related to improved sleep quality and quantity, especially in the menopausal ages, as opposed to men who can increase their activity and don't actually notice a difference in their sleep quality and quantity. So if you're wrestling with that uncontrollable, you can't control the menopause thing, but maybe getting more activity can be helpful in improving that sleep quality. Aging is also an uncontrollable thing. We're all aging. But just because we can't stop aging doesn't mean that we have to surrender to falling apart. And so one of the things that I recommend, and this is true from a biological perspective, the older we get, the less sleep our body requires. It doesn't mean that it wouldn't be good if it could sleep more. It's just part of the aging process. Your brain doesn't require as much time to repair and grow because it's not really repairing and growing as much as when you were younger. And the same thing in the body, which, the repairing process that adapts you is less robust as we age. It's just unfortunately a part of the way life works and a part of the process of of the body growing out of youth, I guess. So what I tend to try to coach my clients on is to age into their perfect day. Okay, we can't control the fact that we're aging, but what we can do is think, okay, if everything goes well in the next couple of years, what does my perfect day look like from start to finish? And that process can help to mitigate stress. That process can help to grow and build a good nutrition plan. That process can help to incorporate exercise. And that process can also put things into perspective. If we're aging, we also don't want to be spending a lot of time doing things we don't want to be doing, because time is precious. And so being able to mold that day well so that it's the right day, it's the kind of day that you're happy about, and at the end of the day you're kind of exhausted by in a good way, and is worth recovering from, and worth waking up to again, that can really help from a sleep perspective, to kind of accept that shortened sleep, and to make the most of the lack of recovery that you would normally get in 20-30 years ago. Then there's anxiety. If you're wrestling with anxiety, in a way, this is an uncontrollable thing. That means your nervous system runs a little hot. This is, things that wouldn't stress everybody out seem to stress you out a little bit more. And hey, there's some things that make people anxious that really should make you anxious. I referenced a dispute for a teenager with a phone that's from real life, but I just won't be naming any names here. It's a good thing that this particular mother is very anxious about the situation. That said, you can't necessarily control the intensity of the emotion that's messing with your sleep, but you can start seeking support in communication. And I'm not saying necessarily a therapist, but if you do wrestle with anxiety regularly, I would say that it would help to work with somebody who does this on a regular basis. But support and communication, being able to speak these things, and being able to mitigate the things that are actually making you anxious, can be a huge step in a proper direction. I personally am a business owner, and I work with business owners, and we joke about sleeping better when we've solved a problem. And it's a true thing. The things that sit in your mind about the business that need to be solved, when you start moving in a positive direction, you sleep better. Why? Well, that thing was making you anxious for good reason. It was important. People's jobs depend on that. People's livelihoods depend on that. It's a good reason to be anxious. At the same time, there's not a supplement for that. The problem has to be solved, and things have to be moved in a good direction. Medications. There are medications that you can be prescribed that can mess with your sleep. Antibiotics are actually one of them. You can, for a respiratory infection or something, you could be taking an antibiotic that can mess with your sleep. We're not exactly sure what the mechanism is, right? But anyway, that said, if all of a sudden you're wrestling with a sleep disturbance, one of the first things you should look at is, have I started a new medication recently? And if the answer is yes, it's worth a discussion with your doctor about what that medication entails. If there are any alternatives, is this something that might work itself out in the relatively near future? That's important, because if I can't tell you how many times people have noticed a change in their body and they're so wigged out by it, and one of my first questions is, have you started any new medications in the last couple of weeks? And they're like, oh yeah, I did this thing. Like, oh, it can affect that? I didn't know. And that's a big deal. It's a really big deal to be like, hey, when you're taking a pill for something, it doesn't just affect that one thing. It can affect a lot of different things. And this isn't a diatribe on medications being bad. I'm just telling you that medications can have unintended side effects. You wouldn't think a antibiotic fighting an infection could mess with your ability to sleep well, but it can. And that's not the only one. There are heart medications, and there are thyroid medications, and there are antacid medications. There's a bunch of different medications that sleep disturbances are a possible side effect. So anytime you start a new one, read through the side effects, have discussions with your doctor. If you notice a sleep disturbance, make sure you tell your doctor about it. Sometimes there can be more mild versions or different dosages that can be tried that would still get the job done from a medical perspective on the issue that you're trying to address, but not disrupt your sleep in the process. That's very important because we don't want to fix a medical issue and then cause a holistic health problem because of the sleep thing. You might also be wrestling with apnea. So some folks have very strangely shaped adenoids, and there could also be a weight issue that is affecting their ability to breathe. So if you're not breathing through the night, it can certainly affect your sleep. And nothing I've talked about tonight is going to fix your inability to breathe. And so if you are at this, commonly people are sleeping, 5, 6 hours, 7 hours, even maybe even longer, but they're not getting rested. They don't feel rested from their sleep. That is sometimes an indication of it's not really that you're not sleeping, it's that you're not actually getting into stages of sleep that are restorative because you're having disruptions in your breathing pattern. And so and apnea is not only mechanical, it could also be neurological. So definitely worth talking to your doctor if you find that. And what they'll do is they'll do a sleep study to find out if you're discontinuing your breathing pattern in the middle of the night. So it's an uncontrollable thing when it's happening. It's something that there are therapies for that can be beneficial to you. If you are experiencing sleep disruptions that you can't control, like babies, don't do anything injurious the next day. So I advise dads when there's a new baby in the house, don't lift heavy weights. lift kind of heavy weights, but don't go for PRs and do powerful movements like box jumps and stuff, because your risk of injury is high because you're sleep deprived. Your brain's not working well, your neurological system stinks, your tissues are under recovered. You're just asking for a good injury that way. So that, I know that's kind of vague, but there's a lot of different reasons your sleep could be disrupted. So just think about it that way. If you had a disruptive period of sleep for a night or two or maybe longer, then be careful about how intense the activities you are that you pick up. Just know, I'm not well rested. I'm not resilient right now. And so maybe this is not the best idea for me. And that will, well, you can wisely avoid a lot of things that are avoidable. So exercise and healthy nutrition are key here. It's such a broad topic that I won't spend a lot of time talking about it. But many times when people tell me they're having a hard time with their sleep, and I start looking at food journals and I start looking at the consistency of their exercise program and their level of activity and stuff, all of those things could be significantly improved before we start talking about whether they need to be spraying lavender or valerian on their pillow, right? And these are often controllables that take time and energy to shift in a proper direction. And so what I tell these folks is we can try these faster fixes to your sleep, lower the temperature for your room, get on the same, wake time and sleep time, improve your carbohydrate consumption before bed, all those things. We can do that, but we really also need to improve your activity, and we really need to also improve the amount of protein that you're eating. So all those things are deeply connected to make this circadian rhythm robust. And any chinks in that armor, anything that takes away from that, can certainly be a significant disruptor to the sleep pattern. And then last but not least, be careful about sleep aids. I'm not going to go on a diatribe about sleep aids, the medications that are often prescribed to help people sleep, like Ambien would be a good example. I'm not going to tell you not to take them. I can't do that. I'm not a doctor. But what I can tell you is that what we're finding in the sleep research is that most medications that are prescribed for sleep are not actually creating sleep. They're creating unconsciousness. Sleep is a restorative process that actually allows the tissues and tendons and ligaments to restore themselves, the neurological tissues to restore themselves, to improve your hormonal function, all those things. It's the shutting down of the factory. But what a lot of the medications today are doing, they're not shutting down the factory so that things can be repaired. They're just turning off the lights. So it's like leaving the motor running, but turning off the lights. And that makes somebody feel like they slept all night because they weren't conscious, but it doesn't necessarily create the restorative process that's required to improve sleep function. So it knocks you out, but it doesn't. Many of those, and that's a very gross underestimate of how those actually work. But be careful with the use of them, especially in the long term. The goal of a sleep aid, in my opinion, when I've worked with doctors and clients who are using sleep aids, it's a short-term fix in the sense that we're going to get you sleeping through the night so you're not laying awake at 2 a.m. But we need to fix the issues that are leading to you not sleeping well. We need to deal with the anxiety. We need to deal with the nutrition issues. We need to deal with the lack of activity. And all of those things need to be managed well so that this isn't a long-term thing. And not everybody feels that way, but that's something I wanted to make sure I said this evening, because it's a very prevalent thing that nobody talks about in our world. So I've said a lot of things about sleep. The key points here: sleep is non-negotiable for growth and betterment. It's the adaptive restorative process that helps you to become stronger every day. Set a bedtime and a wake time. Keep your room cool. Manage your stress, with the light stress, the microbiome stress, the mental stress. Eat well and control inflammation. Exercise is your friend here. Use supplements intelligently, and don't let anxiety go untreated. Very, very important pieces there. So I'm going to open up the floor to discussion for anybody who's live, if I've generated some questions for you. And to everybody else, thank you for joining us on this replay. You rock. Until next time, kick butt and take names.